All right. This meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners for Tuesday, March 5th is in session. Please call the roll.
Mr. Cappers.
Here.
Mr. Emmerich.
Here.
Mrs. Westfall.
Here.
Okay, we have our minutes of our February 5th meeting before us. We also have the minutes of the January 16th joint meeting of the Park and Recreation Board. We can accept the Park and Recreation Board minutes. We didn't take any action and none of us even attended, unfortunately. So we can accept those minutes, and then we need to approve the February 5th minutes unless there's some objection, deletion, addition, or substitution you want to make to those minutes.
Motion to approve minutes.
Okay, motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They stand approved. Mr. Drake is down with an illness today, so he will not be present. Mr. Seiler, do you have anything to add to your report?
I do not have anything to add unless there are any questions.
Well, why aren't you keeping the ice inside the arena instead of out on the streets?
We have it out there too.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Seiler? Okay. Mr. Boer, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Do you have anything to add to your report?
I don't know that I have anything to add to it. I think everything's, I would just add, we're kind of in the, getting towards the tail end here. May 2nd still remains the completion date for the clubhouse. So, as I put in my report, the siding's pretty much all finished. We're getting one side of the roof put in place with the shingles, and then we're about probably 1 week away or so from beginning to drywall, just some final wiring and things like that to make sure that's all in place before we start drywalling, but that's kind of where we are right now, so looking forward to a pretty crazy April once that comes around.
Sure. A couple of questions for you.
Yes, sir.
The cooperation between you and Mr. Seiler and the rec department on, facility usage and things like that, is that going ahead are you continuing that cooperation? Is anything happening there?
Yeah, so this past week I sat down with Darlene, now that she's been hired in, and with Dave Kirk as well, and started kind of formulating just some initial ideas on that in terms of cooperation. So once we get some things kind of down in writing as far as the usage of the building, the usage of the meeting room, pricing for room rentals and things like that, then that's something we'll get that information to you once we've kind of finalized some of those things. But she started, I think I put it in my report, she started February 26th, so I had a chance to sit down with her and Dave yesterday, actually. So.
Okay. And you also noted in your report that the shoreline was approved as a name by City Council.
Yes.
What have you done to brand that out there? Any actions been taken so far?
That's something we're kind of in the initial phases along with Ken over here to work on getting a few people to look at logo designs and things like that.
All right, good. Any other questions, Mr. Brewer?
No.
Thank you, Kyler.
You're welcome.
My report from the Planning Commission only stems from the fact that last month, as you noted in the minutes, we approved fees in lieu for Villages of Concord as opposed to real estate being donated to the city. Planning Commission has been requested to do a preliminary plat of the Villages of Concord, and it's been tabled for now. It may proceed, it may not, who knows. So we took the action we were requested to take, but I just want to report to you that it's not finalized yet. Any old business come before the commission? New business. We have a discussion with a David Lindeman. Is there a David Lindeman here? Would you come on up, Mr. Lindeman, and give us your name and address, if you would, please?
Yes, my name is Dave Lindeman. I'm 2127 Peters Road in Troy, and I'm here to represent the Troy-Miami County Public Library Board of Directors, which is a mouthful. Adrian and Rachel are also here from the board. They're here to keep an eye on me. We're here to make a request of the city today, and it's very important to us because it's going to help us determine the future of the library, what direction we can go. As you know, the library is located on the former site of Edwards School, which, by the way, has been an educational block since the 1820s. Moved there in 1976, and at that time the library took possession of the front part of the lot, and the city took possession of the back part, which is now Bruckner Park. Well, over the past few years, you can imagine since 1976, there have been a lot of changes. And the library has really undergone dramatic changes in the way we service the people who use the library, which are the people of Troy and also people in Miami County. And we have been discussing for quite a while now a need to bring the library into the 21st century. Many of the ways that we now advocate education and literacy come through programming for children and adults. We also do a lot of things differently than they were done in 1976. And we simply need to now expand. We need a bigger space that's formatted differently for the different things we do. We get a little bit of urgency on this because in our current building, we have a major heating and cooling problem that will require not repairs but total renovation. It's very expensive. And before we spend all that money, we want to try to figure out where we're going to go for the near and the long-term future, for the next 50 or 60 years. And so we've been talking with, we've got an architect in, engineering firm in, realtors in. We really think the location is important. It's been an educational center in this town since almost the very beginning. It's very convenient for people who use the library, and it brings a lot of people into Troy, into downtown Troy. The problem is in our many investigations, the only efficient and really reasonable way to expand our space there is to do it behind the library. Going up is we explored that, and the architect told us that was a really bad idea. And so the only way we have to go is back. But in going back, there's not enough room there to go back and to provide parking and all the other things we need to provide. So we want to stay where we are, and we want to come up with something that for the long term will meet the needs of the people of Troy and the surrounding area. But in order to do that, and this is a very condensed version of what we've been going through for the last year, but we feel that we would need to utilize the Bruckner Park space as part of the library complex. So we're here today to ask you if the city would consider vacating Bruckner Park so that the library could use it in an expansion project. And we're talking a pretty major project, and we're not talking about putting a storage shed on the back. This would be a large expansion with large meeting space for programs, smaller meeting rooms for tutoring and other small group meetings, office space and workspace, which we're very short on right now, to put together the programs and handle all the ins and outs that we didn't have 45 years ago. So that's why we're here, and we're certainly glad to answer any questions or take any direction from you that you can provide.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit, if you would, please. You had indicated that you have some urgency, but what exactly is your time frame if we were to go forward with such an endeavor?
Well, it's one of these deals. My fingers are crossed.
Crossing.
I got two fingers there.
All right. That's all we want.
Without going into all the details, we basically have to redo our entire heating and cooling system in that building, which would require, simply because what we have is on its last legs and there are no longer ways to, it's obsolete. And we can keep it going for a while, but we would certainly rather get started on it sooner as opposed to later. Our thought process now is that we don't have any thing to show you, like, this is what we'll do, because we have to know we can do it first before we go seek proposals from architects. But
What is the thought of the use of Bruckner Park? Is that going to be another parking lot and you're going to move the building back, or is it going to be a separate structure, or
well,
what's the thought?
that would be, we'd be looking for ideas there. The two things you mentioned are probably the two possibilities, that you have a second building that's connected somehow. You have Bruckner Park as used as parking, or part of it is parking and part of it for some sort of expansion and use part of the current parking lot. We don't know yet for sure, but you know, obviously there's the Rotary Club did a lot of work in that park, and there are, if you've been in there, you know that each tree has, a lot of the trees have memorial plaques, and we would certainly move the smaller trees or replant trees with and save those, and try to keep some of that history and credit that they deserve for what they've done in that area.
Okay. The entity itself, the Miami County Public Library, is that a nonprofit corporation? Is it a government entity? Can you help me out there? I'm not sure of what the type of entity it is.
That's a good question.
Well, we receive, I'm Rachel Bosey.
This is being broadcast nationally, that's why you...
I'm Rachel Bosey, 550 Chartwell Court in Troy. We receive some state funding for the Miami County part of it. We also have a tax levy, a permanent levy, so we get city funds as, you know, city resident funds. So we're a little bit of both.
Okay, that helps out, because I think we have more flexibility if you're a taxing government authority with a levy. Okay. Do either one of you two have any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard rumors, everything from it's going to be moved someplace else to you're going to build a new facility. I know that it's had lots and lots of problems with the building, and I was just curious whether a new facility would be the better option, or I know you're still exploring that, but.
We really are, and a new facility seems to be a really high expense, and would have to be somewhere else. And so we really value the downtown location that we have and have been in. And we don't want to abandon that without fully exploring all of our options to stay. I think that, you know, we're a little worried about what the community will say if we just say, oh, we're going to leave. We need to have reasons to not be able to stay, really good reasons to not be able to stay before we do that.
There is I mean, we have discussed the possibility, and I will say this, and now somebody will hear it, and I'll have to put a guard outside my house probably, of demolishing the current building and then starting over. But as Rachel said, the expense on that is pretty huge. I'm not saying that at some point maybe that ends up being the best option, but at this point that's not our preferred option.
Take this with a grain of salt, but wouldn't solar panels up there?
We have examined that, actually. You asked. We did actually look into redoing that. That is not an economically viable option.
I think as a, and I've talked to Mr. Drake about this. I called him today and wished him a recovery, speedy recovery. The Bruckner Park, is my understanding, is used mainly by the library's patrons. And Jeremy doesn't see that as being used a whole lot by the public as well. In fact, the public kind of thinks it belongs to the library.
Exactly.
And what I would suggest is what we do is get a legal opinion from our law directors on what we can do on the transfer of the real estate. I know that we have transferred real estate before without seeking public bids or auction on the real estate if it was a government entity like Board of Education. Okay, so we would get his legal opinion on that. And then what we might want to do is, after we get that legal opinion, give you like a letter of intent that's conditioned upon reviewing your plans and specs and things like that, so that if we agree that that might be something we want to do, you would then be given your next green light to go forward with making some plans. After you make the plans, you present the plans to us, and we approve the plans for transfer of the land to the entity that you represent, vacating it. I don't think that's the proper word for it, but transferring the property. I would imagine any transfer of the property may contain also some right of reversion. If the Miami County Public Library ever ceases to use that property, it would then revert back to the city. Is that something that is within your time frame?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the entire board, but I would say certainly that we would be, we just want to start moving ahead.
Sure.
And that would be a great way, in my opinion, to begin that process. We've got a lot of work to do, and we just have to start to take the first step, and this will do that for us.
Sure.
But it's not our job to approve their building and so forth. We're just, I mean, when you say review
Well, we don't
what
want
you're,
to make sure that the tool shed goes back on this.
Right.
Mr. Lindman suggested.
right, but that's not what they're doing.
Well, I just want to be assured that it's going to be an attractive building, because right now Bruckner Parks is a very attractive park. So
Absolutely.
we don't have any control at all after we get rid of the property, other than what we put in the deed as a reversionary right. So,
I think we'd be happy to work with you in that way.
okay. You too?
I mean, we're all on the same side there, and what we're looking for is something that really is
Right.
great for downtown Troy, and from our side, for all the people who use the library from Troy and from our other service areas. So we really want the same thing there.
Yeah, I would love to see it stay in the same
Oh,
location.
sure.
Yeah. I mean, is any conversation due to the Rotary Club or anything like that with their contributions to the park at all?
I think what we might want to do is try to maintain the memorials in some fashion.
Absolutely.
Hopefully that would be part of your plan.
Yes.
And then, Sue, do you need to stretch? Is that what you're doing? Mrs. Knight, would you approach the podium if you would, please?
Well, only just mentioning the Rotary Club, you know, they did make the major investment in the initial gazebo. And only within the last few months have actually put some more money into it. So I think letting them know about the potential that, you know, the park board could be making a recommendation to council would be appropriate.
Sure. We're still a couple months away from that.
Absolutely.
But I think you're absolutely correct.
Certainly.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yes, I stress it.
And would you then ask Mr. Kerber for a legal opinion as to what we can do with the real estate? including perhaps
Absolutely.
a-
We will get that
a
to him in
transfer
the next few days and copy you in.
Great, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Any other questions of the representatives here today? Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll get back to you and be in communication.
We appreciate it.
Okay. Kyler, the next thing on the agenda is a review and consideration of the approval of the 2019 golf fees.
Yeah, just
I
on
thought we
the,
did that in December. Did we not do that in December?
for 2018, yes, I'm just updating the,
2019?
yes, I'm just updating winter rates for the month of March.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for this year, so it's on the very back page, just looking for your review and approval on those. And it would just be for the month of March, and then it would, we would talk about, usually we enact those same rates around October in the fall.
Okay, because in December, we enacted rates for the following year, so people, if they wanted to, they could go ahead and make a gift for Christmas.
Correct,
You
yes.
remember that?
Yes,
Okay.
those are we're talking, this is talking about
Just
just our
March.
winter rates, yes, for
Just
March, and
March.
then we would review them again in
Okay,
October.
I got you.
But we did approve 2019 rates, just our regular, what we would call our summer rates,
Right.
which would then go into effect April 1.
Gotcha.
If you were to review and approve
Okay.
those rates there.
And these are competitive with area
Yes,
golf courses?
yes, sir.
Either one of you have any questions concerning the rates?
No, we talked about condition of the course and everything like that. I mean, you feel like that's applicable for the rates that are outlined?
I do, yes.
I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion
To approve.
to approve, yeah.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? They are adopted.
Thank you.
Mr. Emmerich did pose an issue, Kyler, and that is, out of all the comments I've been receiving concerning the new construction out there, the result of the conversation ends up, yeah, I can't wait till it opens, but what about the grounds? Are you guys going to take care of the grass this year? Tell us about what's going on with that.
Sure. I actually just recently sent out a facility newsletter to everyone in our email database, kind of not only outlining all the changes that we have coming for this year, both with the building and with the driving range, but also kind of updating, you know, what happened with the fairways, what we've done since then, and where we're going. So just to kind of summarize that, as we have discussed before, you know, we experienced disease mostly in our fairways, but also in some other areas of the golf course back in late August. And we identified that as gray leaf spot, a disease that really hasn't been seen in this area for a number of years. So once it was identified, we then purchased fungicide necessary to stop or suppress any further you know, expansion of the disease and killing it. We then made the decision to you know, overseed, which was necessary about 2 weeks after that in September. You know, knowing that you're not going to get, you know, you're not going to get it all to come back at the same time. So we saw, I think, in some areas, some pretty encouraging regrowth, probably back to 50-60% of where they were prior to. Other areas you still have that, particularly areas on the back nine that don't get a lot of sunlight. You still have some areas there where, you know, as we move into a new year, we've had to kind of rope off certain areas and you know, eliminate or curb as much both foot traffic and cart traffic as we can. So, you know, what we then did was, you know, put into our budget for 2019 extra money for seeds so that we could dormant seed fairways, which we did here in the middle of February, which I put in my report. And now you wait, and you know, nature takes its course as far as that goes. And we also again have put out many cart signs to curb traffic, to keep people off of the fairways with golf carts as much as possible, to keep them into the rough, into those areas which are by comparison healthier. So it's one that you know, when something like this happens, I mean, like I said, I've outlined how we've dealt with it, and now you wait to see how much is coming back in. It's realistically, I think it's an issue that, you know, will take a little bit more time. You know, we'll have to see where we are in April and May as grass begins to go back. Certain areas are getting closer to being back to where they need to be, but there's going to be some areas that inevitably, you know, because of where they are located on the golf course, you know, we still will have to keep traffic away from, just because you don't get the kind of grow in that you would get in areas that are getting the proper sunlight.
And that's kind of one thing we talked about at the Miami Shores board the other day, is that basically it's kind of a multi-pronged approach, right? You know, part of it is putting some of those cart path signs back out on there, reestablishing that, and there's some discussion on the mixture of grass too, right?
Sure.
And that this problem really wasn't unique to Miami Shores. There's kind of similar problems experienced with the Troy football stadium. There's some other areas that have experienced it too. So there's kind of a multi-pronged approach, but I know you talked about the seed mixture there too.
Yeah, so, and that brings up a good point. You know, the vast majority of our golf course is rye, which just happens to be more susceptible to gray leaf spot. Years ago, it was, you know, gray leaf spot was one that didn't affect rye, but that was about 15 or 20 years ago. Diseases mutate, and this is something that Ryan could probably explain a little bit better than I can, but in the past 15 or 20 years, as gray leaf spot has mutated, ryegrass has become more susceptible to gray leaf spot. And so as we overseeded and then dormant seeded, we've used a mixture of more bluegrass than ryegrass to put in a little bit more variety into the turf. Bluegrass may take a little bit more water, but it is far more resistant to gray leaf spot. So that's one thing that we've done, and not just to reseed, but to reseed with a little bit different type of grass, so that we're not as susceptible moving forward to this particular disease.
How about the T signs?
Sure. So I think, was it yesterday, we've got the back from Mr. Kerber, the law director. He just was kind of putting the finishing touches on the actual agreement that Tim Boutwell and I, or that Tim will sign with Miami Shores. So I think I just have to review that and get it back to Sue, and then we'll be able to move forward with that.
Great, good.
So.
Any other questions of Mr. Brewer? Anything else to come before the park board? She's just stretching. Mrs. Knight, would you come forward, please?
Yes, share some good news.
Okay.
We like to have wonderful events downtown, and the board had already approved the use of the Northwest Quadrant on June 28, part of the Troy Main Street summer programming. Well, we did receive word that an application to the U.S. Army Band, the 122nd Army Band, which is made up of reservists, will be doing a concert on June 28th on Friday night downtown. And so that's a added attraction, and we're excited about that. They have been here, I think, twice. It's maybe been 2 to 3 years since we've had them. Our only concern right now is they need a very large stage, and if we can't build it big enough, they'll play on the grass, is what they've said. They're good dancing music, for those of you that might want to bring your spouses and come out and enjoy that. So we're kind of excited about adding that.
How many members are going to be in that band?
We've asked that. We will get that information. These are really made up of reserve members, most of which, as I understand, are more like maybe school band directors or music teachers or something. And they do a 2-week time frame of performing in the state during the summer, and they do it geographically, so they're going to be close to this area. So we're not sure. They have their next weekend coming up the 9th and 10th of March, and then they'll let us know how many members and what the size is.
That's
So they were very well received last time, and so our only obligation is to help publicize, provide them a place to change, and a lot of water.
Yeah, sure.
So we just wanted to share that with you. It doesn't take any other action because it was on your list, but we're just happy about that good news.
Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Anything else to come before the board? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?